Two teenage sisters, identical in appearance and nearly inseparable in life, vanished one cloudless afternoon from a beach. No cries for help, no known threats, no evidence of struggle, just a beach towel, a dropped phone, and the strange silence that followed their absence. 8 months passed. The world kept turning, theories cooled, and the family mourned for answers. Then, hundreds of miles away from that beach, a private pilot's emergency landing on an uninhabited island made a shocking discovery, something no one was prepared for. The sun was high, the surf was loud, and Shell Rock Beach was packed when Ava and Olivia Sanders arrived just before noon. At 17, the twins had everything going for them: honor students, track stars, and local celebrities on social media. They parked their cruiser bikes near the old lifeguard shack, spread out a blanket beneath the watchful eye of their older brother, Mason, and dove headfirst into the water. It was just another Saturday until it wasn't. The first thing that went wrong came barely an hour later. Mason, distracted by a phone call and a flirtation with a girl near the volleyball net, glanced back toward the twins' towel and noticed only one figure returning from the ocean: Olivia. She walked casually, brushed salt water from her face, and plopped down on the towel, alone. Mason waved, confused. He walked over. "Where's Ava?" Olivia frowned. "She was right behind me. You didn't see her?" That was 1:12 p.m. By 1:20 p.m., Mason was running up and down the sand, screaming Ava's name. Lifeguards joined in. Swimmers were questioned. Drones were launched over the coastline. Divers were called. People assumed she had been swept under or injured by a rock. But the ocean gave nothing back. Police arrived within the hour. They scanned the scene, took statements, bagged the dropped iPhone that had been near the twins' towel. Nothing suspicious, no blood, no drag marks. Olivia was trembling, near tears, and said the last time she saw Ava was in the water. "We were diving under waves. She popped up 1 second, then gone the next." By sunset, news vans were lined along the road leading into Shell Rock. Ava's name trended on Twitter. Divers combed the ocean floor again. But as night crept in, so did the dread, not just in Mason's chest, but deep in the core of every local watching. Because this wasn't the first disappearance. 2 years earlier, a boy named Landon Moore had vanished along the same stretch of beach. Also in broad daylight, he was never found either. By day 3, the Sanders family was breaking. Olivia had stopped talking. Mason wouldn't eat. Their father, a retired Coast Guard officer named Tom Sanders, set up his own command post near the dunes, mapping currents, tides, even hiring private search crews. Nothing. But things got stranger. When Tom reviewed Ava's iCloud backups, he noticed something disturbing. A photo taken seconds before the disappearance. The image was blurry, water droplets across the lens, but visible in the corner was a dark silhouette just offshore. Too close to be a boat, too straight to be a swimmer. Tom brought it to Detective Vance, the lead investigator. "What is this?" he asked. Vance narrowed his eyes. "Could be a lifeguard board," he offered. "Could be driftwood. We'll check the metadata." But he didn't. Mason knew because he checked Ava's phone himself later that night. The photo had geolocation data: 37.9998 degrees north, 122.5136 degrees west. It was exactly 12 yards offshore. Too close to be a coincidence. Then came a call that changed the trajectory of everything. 8 days after Ava's disappearance, an anonymous tip came through the department's voicemail. A deep, raspy voice, no caller ID. Just this message: she didn't drown. Check the southern cliffs. There's more than sand under Shell Rock. Authorities swept the cliffside. Hidden behind thick brush was an old trail, one no longer on any modern maps. It led to a collapsed tunnel, maybe an old storm drain. Cavers were called. They squeezed through the opening and found a narrow concrete corridor running deep beneath the cliff. Empty, but strange. Inside on the wall, written in black marker, were the words, "What you see isn't always real. No prince, no cameras, no aba." The media was relentless. Rumors spread: kidnapping rings, serial predators, even wild conspiracy theories about organ trafficking. Olivia withdrew even more. She refused interviews. Her eyes grew hollow, her voice flat. It was like a part of her had vanished with Ava. But Mason didn't stop. He started sleeping in his car near the beach, recording movements at night. He installed trail cams near the cliffs. He built a private Reddit thread full of amateur sleuths trying to crack the case. And one night, 2 months after the disappearance, he caught something. At 2:43 a.m., one of the trail cams near the hidden trail captured a figure. Tall, male, he moved confidently like he knew the path. He vanished into the tunnel entrance with something slung over his shoulder. Mason brought it to Detective Vance. The detective sighed. Could be a fisherman. Could be a prank. You're spinning your wheels. Mason slammed the desk. Someone is out there. What if Ava's alive? What if they both are? Both? Mason froze. Olivia was standing in the hallway behind him, pale, silent. He turned. What do you mean, both? What do you know? She blinked slowly. I never told anyone this. I didn't see Ava go under. I heard her scream. Mason's heart stopped. Olivia stepped forward, voice trembling. Someone grabbed her from behind. I turned and she was gone, but I heard footsteps in the water, fast, not hers. Then she looked directly at her brother and said something that haunted him for the rest of his life. It wasn't the water that took her. It was a man. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Mason couldn't sleep, not after what Olivia had said. A man, not a wave, not a riptide, not an accident. Someone had grabbed Ava, and nobody believed it. The next morning, Mason stood outside the trail entrance under the cliff. The tunnel was still sealed with police tape, but he didn't care. He ducked under, flashlight in hand, and slid into the darkness. The smell hit him first, damp concrete, old seaweed, rust. He moved slowly, his light cutting through the black. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for him to turn his shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped. His footsteps echoed like gunshots. About 50 feet in, he saw it again. The words on the wall, "What you see isn't always real." He stared at them, fingers tracing the ink. Then he noticed something new. Just beside the words, scratched into the concrete, barely visible unless the light hit it right, were initials. A.S. Ava Sanders. He stepped back, heart racing. Suddenly he heard something, a noise, a rustle from deeper in the tunnel. Not a drip, not an echo, something alive. He switched off the flashlight. Silence, then another noise, a sharp, soft scraping like fabric brushing against the wall. He spun back, light on again, and moved fast toward the sound. The tunnel turned. The wall curved inward into a chamber. He stepped in, empty, but something was off. On the ground was a boot print, fresh. And not his. Mason crouched. The sole was deep, heavy, like military or hiking boots. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Then he heard the sound again, this time behind him. He turned. Freeze. A beam of light hit his eyes. A man's voice, armed, not police. "Who the hell are you?" the man demanded. Mason raised his hands. "My sister's missing. I'm not a threat." The man stepped closer. He wore jeans, a tactical vest, no badge. He held a handgun, pointed low but ready. "You shouldn't be in here," the man said. "This isn't a public trail." "I'm looking for Ava Sanders," Mason said. "She disappeared from Shell Rock Beach. I think someone took her down here." The man frowned, studying him. "Turn around. We're getting out of here." "I'm not leaving without answers." The man didn't argue, just jerked his head and motioned him forward. They walked out of the tunnel in silence. Outside, the man finally lowered the weapon. "You don't know what you're messing with." "What's your name?" Mason asked. "Call me Reed. You're not a cop." "Nope." "Then who are you?" Reed took a breath. "I used to work private security. A company was doing work along these cliffs years ago. Underground storage. They abandoned it. Left tunnels behind. Not all of them were reported." "For what?" "Smuggling. Not my job to ask," Reed replied. "But since that girl vanished, I've been watching this place. You're not the only one looking." Mason leaned forward. "So you believe me?" "I believe someone's using these tunnels, and they don't want to be found." The two exchanged numbers. Reed promised to reach out if he saw anything new. Mason returned home and didn't say a word to his dad or Olivia. But something had shifted. He now had proof, footprints, voices, tunnels no one knew about. He just needed time. 3 days later, time ran out. A man named Greg Talbot was arrested 2 towns over, caught trying to break into a storage facility with a fake ID. When police searched his car, they found something strange. A bracelet. It was thin, woven with tiny blue stones. Ava's bracelet. Olivia confirmed it. Mason sat in the police station across from Talbot. The man was mid-30s, twitchy, beard overgrown. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I didn't take her," Talbot muttered. "I found it where?" "In the sand," he said. "North edge of Shell Rock, near the rocks." Detective Vance stepped in. "Greg, we know your background. Assault, breaking and entering, probation violations. Now you're caught with a missing girl's bracelet?" "I didn't touch her," Greg shouted. "She wasn't alone." "What do you mean?" Vance asked. Greg leaned forward, voice shaking. "There were two of them. Same face. One was quiet, the other kept screaming. Everyone in the room froze." Mason stood. "When, where?" Greg's eyes darted around. "I don't know. A cabin, small, near the coast. Some guy paid me to help move supplies. Said they were his nieces. I didn't ask. Then I saw the news. I left. I panicked." "Who was the guy?" Vance asked. "Don't know. Foreign accent. Eastern European, maybe. Called himself Victor. That was all he knew. No last name. No license plate. No address. Just a name. Victor." Mason's heart was thudding. This was real. Someone had taken Ava and possibly Olivia too. The way Greg described them, it didn't make sense. Olivia had never mentioned being taken. Had she blocked it out? He rushed home. Olivia was in her room, headphones on. He knocked once, then barged in. She looked up, startled. Mason sat on the bed. "Liv, you told me Ava was grabbed." She nodded. "Do you remember anything else?" "I told you everything." "No," Mason said. "You didn't. Someone saw two girls. Twins screaming, one silent, one loud. Was it you?" Olivia stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. Mason stood. "Then why do you keep waking up at night screaming her name?" She didn't answer. Mason left the room, furious, confused. That night he got a call from Reed. "You need to see this," Reed said. They met at a lookout near the beach cliffs. Reed opened the trunk of his car. Inside was a small drone. He pulled out a laptop and showed Mason footage. Reed had flown the drone far offshore past the last tide line toward a rocky outcrop. "Keep watching," he said. At the edge of the video, a tiny island appeared, barely the size of a house, trees. No looks, no buildings. But then in a clearing, the camera caught movement. Two figures, small, standing. One of them waved. Mason leaned over the laptop, staring at the paused drone footage. There they were, two people, barely dots in the distance, standing in a clearing on what looked like an uninhabited island. No structures, no boats, just brush, trees, and an open patch of earth. One of them waved at the drone. It was hard to tell their exact size, but they looked small. Young, female. "You think that's them?" Mason asked, his voice low. "I don't know," Reed replied. "But whoever it is, they don't belong there. That island's not on any recent maps. I checked. No power, no buildings, nothing. It's just rocks and jungle." Mason sat back. "How far is it from the coast?" "About 80 miles too far to swim. No docks, no fishing trails. The only way out there is by boat or air." "You think that Victor guy took them there?" Reed nodded. "If someone wanted to hide people, that island's perfect." Mason felt cold in his chest. "We need to go now." Reed held up a hand. "Slow down. That's open water. You need permits, fuel, gear. I can try getting a boat, but it'll take a few days." "I don't have a few days. What if they're not safe?" Reed's eyes narrowed. "Then we find another way." That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He tossed in bed, his thoughts racing. What if that was Ava? What if she was alive this whole time? He thought about the bracelet, the cave, the name Victor, and Greg's terrified face in that interview room. It didn't add up. Olivia knocked on his door around 2 a.m. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes heavy. "I saw the video," she said. Mason nodded. "I think it's her," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I just feel it." Mason stepped forward. "Liv, you have to tell me something. Do you remember anything else? Anything that might help us?" She looked down. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I keep seeing trees," she said. "Thick ones, and a metal door, and someone with a black hat. He always had a scar under his eye." Mason froze. "A scar," she nodded. "Like a cut that never healed. Deep, right under the left eye." Mason suddenly remembered something. When Greg had been arrested, he mentioned that Victor wore sunglasses most of the time. But once, when they were inside the cabin, he took them off. And Greg had said, his face looked like someone carved a map into it. Mason made a note, scarred face, remote island, no docks, Victor. 2 days later, Reed called with news. I got a guy, he said, private pilot. No questions asked, he'll fly us low and fast. Mason packed a backpack, food, water, first aid kit, a folding knife, a flashlight, and his dad's old Glock 19, tucked safely in a hidden holster under his jacket. He didn't want to bring it, but he wasn't walking onto that island empty-handed. Olivia wanted to come, but Mason refused. You stay here. I need someone on the outside. If something happens, call Dad. Call the cops. Call everyone. The next morning, Mason and Reed met the pilot at a small airstrip just outside town. His name was Terry, mid-40s, quiet, sunburned face, chewing toothpicks like they were candy. This island's not on the charts, Terry said, spinning a pen over his flight map. But I can get you there. It's going to be bumpy. No runway, no signal. You boys ready? Mason looked out at the Cessna parked behind them. Small, loud, fragile, he nodded. Let's go. The flight was rough. They took off just after dawn, the wind heavy off the coast. Mason stared out the window as the land gave way to ocean. Endless blue. No boats, no ships, nothing. About an hour in, Terry pointed out the front windshield. There, he shouted. 12 o'clock. The island appeared like a bruise on the sea. Dark, jagged, trees knotted together like fists. No signs of life, no smoke, no movement. They circled twice, then Mason saw it. In the clearing, the same one from the drone footage, a signal. Someone had arranged driftwood into a giant X. They're signaling for help, Mason shouted. Terry's voice came through the headset. I can't land, but I can drop you about 50 yards offshore. There's a beach inlet. I've got an inflatable in back. Let's do it. Minutes later, Mason and Reed were in the water, rowing fast. The little inflatable raft bobbed over the waves as they approached the sand. Mason's stomach twisted. They were really doing this. As they hit the shore, they jumped out, dragging the raft up onto dry land. Birds scattered. The jungle loomed ahead. Thick trees, no paths. Reed handed Mason the small radio. Check in every hour. If I say run, you run. Mason nodded. They started moving. The jungle was tight. Wet leaves brushed their faces. Every step cracked branches. Bugs buzzed in their ears. The deeper they went, the darker it got. After 20 minutes, they found it. The clearing and what they saw stopped them in their tracks. A fire pit, burned out, a wooden frame, maybe a shelter, broken, abandoned. But the X was still there, no people, no Abba, no sign of anyone. Then Mason noticed something, scratched in the bark of a tree. AS Bus OS, 814, it was real. They had been here. Reed turned to him. We need to move. If they were here, they didn't leave on their own. Suddenly, a rustle fast behind them. Both men spun around. A man stepped from the trees. He was tall, sunburned, wearing black, and under his left eye a scar, Victor. He raised a pistol, calm and slow. Who are you? He asked in a thick accent. Mason froze. Reed didn't. He drew fast, pulling his own weapon. Gunshots cracked. Mason dove behind a tree. Victor fired twice, missing. Reed returned fire. One shot hit Victor in the shoulder. He fell, groaning. Mason ran forward, gun up. He kicked the weapon from Victor's hand and pressed a knee to his chest. Where is she? Mason shouted. Where's Ava? Victor just smiled. She's not yours anymore. Victor's body was tense beneath Mason's knee, but the smirk on his face didn't budge. Blood seeped from his shoulder, dark and sticky, pooling beneath him. Reed kept his gun aimed steady, eyes locked. Mason shoved Victor's chest harder. Where is she? Where's my sister? Victor winced but said nothing. Reed stepped closer. Talk, or I make that hole in your shoulder a matching set. Still nothing. Reed kicked him in the ribs. Victor gasped, coughing, but the smug look returned almost instantly. I won't tell you anything, he whispered. You're already too late. Mason raised the gun again, fists shaking. Try me. Victor's smile finally cracked. Even if you kill me, you'll never find the others. Others? Reed asked, voice sharp. What others? Victor's eyes darted to the side. That was enough? Reed reached down, grabbed him by the collar, and yanked him to his feet. You're going to walk us there, now. Victor grunted but didn't fight. Mason picked up his pistol and slid it into his own waistband, then pressed the muzzle of his Glock into Victor's back. "Walk," Mason ordered. They pushed him the trees. He limped, dragging his right leg slightly. The jungle grew thicker, hotter. Every few feet Mason swatted away vines, his mind buzzing with adrenaline and fear. After about 10 minutes of hiking, the trees opened up into a deeper clearing. Hidden under a canopy of leaves was a metal hatch, rusted, with a thick lock and a chain. Victor stopped. "There." Mason stared at it. "What is this?" "Storage," Victor said. "For what?" Victor just smiled again. Reed yanked the key from Victor's belt and handed it to Mason. Mason unlocked the chain with shaking hands. It clattered to the ground. He grabbed the handle and pulled hard. The door creaked open with a metallic groan, revealing a narrow stairwell leading underground. Pitch black, Reed handed him a flashlight. "Stay behind me." "No," Mason said. "I go first." He clicked the light on and stepped down into the darkness. The metal steps clanged under his weight. The air was damp and sour like old meat and mildew. They reached the bottom. The narrow hallway was made of concrete, lined with rusted pipes. The walls were stained with water damage. Bare bulbs dangled from the ceiling, most burned out. A few flickered dimly. They passed 2 empty rooms. Metal beds, ripped blankets, nothing else. Then they reached a third room. Mason opened the door and froze. Inside were 2 girls, maybe 12 or 13, lying on cots. Their wrists were tied, mouths gagged. They jerked up, terrified. Reed rushed in, knife out, cutting the ropes. Mason pulled off their gags. "Who are you?" one girl whispered, her voice cracked from dehydration. "I'm here for my sister," Mason said. "Do you know Ava Sanders?" The second girl blinked fast, as if trying to understand. "We heard that name. The tall girl." She fought back. "They took her away. Weeks ago." "Where?" "They said she was special. She was sent to another place. A building. They kept calling it the Vault." Mason stood up, eyes on Victor. "You've got 1 chance left." "Where's the vault?" Victor leaned against the wall, gritting his teeth. "You'll never find it." Reed didn't wait. He walked up and slammed the butt of his pistol into Victor's jaw. The man crumpled unconscious. The girls cried out in panic. Reed turned. "We don't have time. If he has backup, they'll be here soon." They carried the girls out, Reed taking one, Mason the other. As they emerged from the hatch, sunlight blinded them. Then came the sound, a motor, faint but growing. "Get to the trees," Reed shouted. They ran into the brush just as a dark green speedboat appeared from the far side of the island. It pulled into the beach fast, skimming over the waves. 3 men jumped out armed, military-style rifles, black vests. "Down!" Reed hissed, pushing Mason and the girls into the dirt. The men fanned out, checking the raft. One pointed to the clearing. "They're here," one of them said. "Track them," Reed pulled Mason close. "We can't fight them head-on." Mason's pulse raced. "We have to get to Terry, the pilot. We don't know if he's still in the air. But I have a flare gun. If we can get to the south ridge, maybe he'll see us." Reed handed Mason a folding knife. "Keep this close." They crawled through the underbrush, every twig snap making Mason flinch. The girls were exhausted but silent. They followed closely, eyes wide and terrified. Shots rang out behind them. Branches snapped. Someone had found the hatch. "They're gonna burn the whole place down," Reed whispered. They moved fast, circling the island's edge. When they reached the south ridge, Mason took the flare from Reed's bag and fired into the sky. It burst in a bright red arc. Now they waited and prayed. Minutes passed. No sign of Terry. No sound of an engine. Then Mason saw it, a tiny glint in the sky. The Cessna. He waved his arms wildly. Reed pulled out a mirror, reflecting light back at the plane. The plane dipped low, circling once, then again. "He saw us!" Mason shouted, but before they could celebrate, more shots rang out, this time from the jungle behind them. Reed spun, firing back. Mason dove for cover with the girls. A bullet cracked past his ear, hitting a tree. Reed ducked, reloaded. "We've got to move." Suddenly, a loud boom echoed from the distance. Smoke curled up from where the hatch had been. "They destroyed the tunnel," Reed said. "They're erasing everything." The plane dropped lower. A rope ladder unfurled from the side. Terry was trying to hover just above the canopy. Reed grabbed the first girl. "You go first." They hoisted her up, then the second girl. Mason grabbed the rope next. "Go," he shouted to Reed. Reed fired one last shot, then climbed after him. Bullets cracked around them as Terry struggled to keep the plane steady. The ladder swung hard in the wind, but they made it. Inside the cabin, Mason collapsed, chest heaving. The girls were safe. Reed gave a thumbs up. Mason nodded, but his heart was still heavy. Ava wasn't there. She was somewhere else, and she was still missing. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The moment the Cessna touched down on the mainland, everything moved fast. Police were waiting. Paramedics rushed the rescued girls away. Reed handed over Victor, alive but unconscious. Mason was surrounded by flashing lights and barking voices, but his mind was somewhere else. Ava. She was still out there, and Victor's cryptic words about a vault echoed in his ears like a drumbeat. At the hospital, the girls were treated for dehydration and bruises. They were scared but stable. Olivia arrived an hour later and threw her arms around Mason, crying. Their dad came next, eyes red, voice low. But none of that mattered as much as the answer Mason was still chasing. When the officers questioned the girls again, one piece of information jumped out. "The vault isn't on the island," one of them said. "It's somewhere cold. We only heard them talk about it once." They said something about pulling out before the next shipment. Reed looked at Mason. "They're moving her." "We're running out of time," Mason said. That night, while the world slept, Reed and Mason were in Reed's garage, working off laptops, tracing satellite images, searching import records, backtracking sea traffic around the island. Reed, being ex-private security, still had access to a few back doors. "Okay," he said, pointing at a screen. "Let's say Victor's not lying. There's a second location, the vault. If it's used to hold people, it needs to be remote but accessible. Power, water, quiet, no eyes." He pulled up a grid of coastal warehouses, islands, decommissioned Navy sites. Mason leaned in. "There," Mason said, pointing. An old U.S. naval station abandoned for years, located inland, surrounded by forest, quiet roads off-grid. No recent utility bills, but 3 months ago, a private security firm leased the land. Reed's jaw tightened. "I know that name. A shell company, one of those groups that works around the law." "You think they're holding her there?" "We don't have proof, but we can find out." The next day, Mason packed light water, protein bars, flashlight, ammo. Reed brought his own set of gear. Kevlar vest, suppressed handgun, compact rifle, duct tape, zip ties, a go bag. They didn't tell anyone, not the cops, not their dad, not Olivia. The less people who knew, the safer Ava would be. By 10 p.m., they were parked a mile from the old naval base. No lights, no cameras, but a chain-link fence wrapped around the property like a warning sign. Just beyond it, a long building half buried in earth, like a bunker. They cut the fence quietly and slipped through the trees. At the edge of the woods, Reed paused. "See that?" he whispered. 2 guards stood near the entrance, rifles slung over their shoulders. One smoked. The other leaned against the wall. "No uniforms," Mason said. "No ID." "Mercs," Reed replied. "Hired guns." They waited. At midnight, a third man arrived, tall, bald, wearing a black coat. His steps were fast, confident, a clipboard in hand. Reed snapped a photo through his night vision scope. "That's our guy." "Who?" "Goes by the name Corbin. Used to run ops in Eastern Europe. He's the kind of guy who gets paid to make people disappear." Mason's fists clenched. "Then we make him talk." They waited for the guards to switch shifts. At 1:13 a.m., the 2 nearest guards wandered around the back of the building. Reed gave the signal. They moved. Reed handled the lock on a side door with a slim tool and a steady hand. It clicked open. They slipped inside. The hallway was long, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. The walls were old concrete, lined with red emergency pipes and warning labels half peeled off. Mason kept his steps light, heart pounding in his ears. They passed empty rooms, storage, offices, old barracks. Nothing new, nothing lived in. Until they heard voices. Reed held up his hand. They crept toward the sound. A steel door was half open. Inside, Corbin was speaking with another man, a laptop on a metal table in front of them. "Vault locations compromised," Corbin was saying. "We move them tomorrow night, by chopper and boat." "Which ones?" the other man asked. "3 girls, one of them's loud. Keeps trying to signal planes." Mason's throat tightened. Ava. Reed mouthed, "We go now." But before they could act, a soft beep echoed from the room. Corbin turned toward the door. "Did you hear something?" Reed didn't wait. He threw a flash grenade into the room and yelled, "Down!" Light and sound exploded. Mason rushed in, gun raised. Corbin stumbled, blinded. The other man reached for a weapon. Mason fired. Crack, one shot, the man dropped. Reed tackled Corbin to the floor and zip-tied his wrists before the man could recover. "Where is she?" Mason screamed. Corbin coughed, blood on his lip. "Screw you." Reed pistol whipped him hard. Corbin howled. "You've got 5 seconds," Mason said, gun inches from his forehead. Corbin laughed, wheezing. "You're too late. They're already prepping the flight. Top hangar, second sublevel." Reed knocked him out cold. "Let's move," Mason said. They ran down the corridor, past warning signs, broken lights, and buzzing wires. A stairwell took them below ground. The air changed, colder, smelled like metal and bleach. Then they heard it, crying. Mason stopped in front of a heavy door. His hand trembled. He opened it slowly. Inside, behind metal bars, were 4 girls. One of them stood instantly, Ava. She looked at him, stunned. "Mason." He stepped forward, eyes wide. "It's me. I'm here." She ran to the bars. "You came." "I never stopped." Reed found the keys. The door clanked open. Ava rushed into Mason's arms, sobbing. "I thought I was going to die here," she whispered. "Not today." Reed freed the others, checking them over. "We've got to go," he said. "Now." Just then the alarms blared. "Beep, beep, beep." "We're made," Reed shouted. Mason took Ava's hand. "We run, no matter what." They bolted up the stairs, Reed leading the way with his rifle raised. Men were coming from both ends, yelling, boots pounding. Reed fired twice, dropping the first 2. "Right," he yelled. They turned down a hall, bullets flying. Sparks flew from the walls. One of the girls screamed. Mason shielded Ava, covering her with his body as Reed pushed through a final door. Outside, wind, moonlight, Reed pulled out his flare and fired it into the sky. Terry was already there. The helicopter roared over the treetops, dropping fast. The girls climbed in. Mason helped Ava in last. Reed jumped just as bullets pinged off the chopper's frame. Terry lifted off, engines screaming. Below, Corbin's men scattered, shouting, their faces tiny and angry. Inside, Mason held Ava close, his voice shaking. "I've got you now, you're safe." But Ava pulled back, eyes wide. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice hoarse. "I saw Olivia once. She was with them." The helicopter's blades roared overhead, chopping through wind and silence alike. Inside, Ava clung to Mason, shaking. Her eyes were glassy, her lips dry, her voice barely audible. But her words hit like a bomb. "I saw Olivia once. She was with them." Mason froze. "She walked past the room they were keeping us in," Ava said, her voice hoarse. "She wasn't tied up. She wasn't scared. She looked normal. She saw me, but she didn't stop. She just kept walking." Reed, sitting across from them with his rifle resting on his lap, leaned forward. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded slowly. "Positive, same hair, same face." It was her. Mason tried to process it. His heart thudded. His mind jumped from one memory to another. Olivia sobbing, Olivia quiet, Olivia avoiding questions. Could she have been lying all along? "Why would she be there?" he asked, more to himself than anyone else. Ava looked down. "I think she's part of it. I don't know how, but she's not a victim." Mason couldn't speak. He just stared out the window as the trees rolled beneath them. His own sister, his twin, the one who was supposed to be safe, the one he had been protecting. Was she involved? Back at the hospital, Ava was taken into care immediately. Reed handled the paperwork. Mason stood in the hallway, numb, watching people move back and forth. His dad arrived a half hour later. So did Olivia. She ran to Ava's room. The moment she stepped inside, Ava screamed, "Get her away from me." Olivia froze in the doorway. "What?" "Ava, it's me." Ava backed up toward the wall. "You were there. You saw me. You didn't help me." Nurses moved in fast. Mason stepped between them. "Liv," he said coldly, "step out. Now." She looked stunned. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she obeyed. Outside the room, she turned to Mason. "You believe her over me?" Olivia whispered. "She saw you," Mason replied. "She has no reason to lie. She's traumatized. You know that." She's confused. "Are you?" he asked. Olivia's expression faltered. Mason leaned closer. Tell me where you were the night Ava disappeared. The whole truth. I did, she said. I told you. No. You told me you saw her scream. Then you said she disappeared. But now we know she was taken, and somehow you show up later near her captors. So let's try this again. Where were you that night? Olivia blinked, eyes wide, then she ran. Hey, Mason shouted, taking off after her. She bolted through the hallway, pushing past nurses, turned a sharp corner, and slammed right into Reed. He caught her by the arms. Easy, he said. Let me go. Not until you explain what Ava saw, Mason snapped. She froze again, trapped between them. Her chest heaved with shallow breaths. Then she broke. I didn't mean to be part of it, she said quietly. I didn't know how far it would go. Reed narrowed his eyes. Start talking. Olivia looked down at the floor, shame thick in her voice. Months before Ava disappeared, I got approached. Some guy online said he worked with a private agency. They offered money, real money, for help. I thought it was just something shady but harmless. They asked questions about our family, about Ava, about our routines. Mason's stomach twisted. You gave them information. I didn't know they were going to take her. Olivia shouted. I swear I thought they were tracking people. Some surveillance scam or something. I thought it was fake. Reed stepped closer. When did you realize it wasn't? When I saw her, in that building, in that cell. I tried to get her out, but there were guards. I was already in too deep. They told me if I said anything, they'd kill her. Or take me too. You could have told us. Told the police, anyone. I was scared, Olivia said, her voice shaking. I didn't know what to do. You did nothing, Mason said coldly. She lowered her head. I'm sorry. Mason stared at her, torn between rage and heartbreak. Reed stepped back. We need to take this to the feds. Right now. No, Mason said, not yet. Reed looked at him. Why not? Because we don't know who else is involved. If Olivia was approached, maybe others were too. Maybe it goes higher than just Victor and Corbin. Mason turned to Olivia. Do you know who recruited you? She hesitated. I think his name was Darrow. I never saw his face, just heard his voice. But he gave me a drop location once. That's where they paid me. Where? Old parking garage in town, second level. Back corner. Mason looked at Reed. Can we trap him? Reed nodded. Yeah, we can. That night, they set up at the garage. Reed staked out the high ground from across the street with a scoped rifle. Mason and Olivia waited in a parked car. A small camera was rigged under the windshield. Mason wore a wire. At exactly 9 p.m., a black SUV pulled up beside them. A man in a suit stepped out. Bald. Broad shoulders, no expression. He held a plain black envelope. Mason got out. You're early, the man said. Wasn't sure you'd come. Is this the last one? The man asked, eyes flicking to Olivia. Mason's hand twitched near his jacket. Yeah, she's ready. The man stepped forward, reaching out the envelope. That's when Mason said, You know, I always wondered what kind of coward sells out kids. The man froze. Reed's voice crackled in Mason's earpiece. Target confirmed. Get him talking. Mason stepped closer. You're Darrow, right? The man stiffened. Mason continued. You talked to Olivia, paid her off. Sent Ava to that vault. You're going to jail. The man reached under his coat, but Reed was faster. Crack. The man's shoulder jerked backward. He dropped to the ground, gun sliding across the pavement. Mason kicked it away and pinned him. Police lights filled the garage within minutes. Darrow was cuffed, bloodied, and pulled away, screaming about lawyers and immunity deals. Olivia sat on the curb, shaking. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered. You let it happen, Mason said. She didn't argue. Later, back at the hospital, Mason stood in Ava's room. She was sleeping now, peacefully for the first time in months. He turned to Reed. Do you think it's over? Reed shook his head. No, we just kicked over the first domino. Mason looked at Ava. Then we keep going. Reed nodded. Until we find every last person involved. 3 weeks later, the air still felt heavy. The story had gone public. News channels ran pieces on the kidnapping ring. People whispered Ava's name in grocery store lines. Olivia's betrayal was buried for now, but not forgotten. She stayed in a government-safe house, under tight surveillance, cooperating with authorities. Whether it was guilt or survival, she gave up everything she knew. But one name still hadn't been traced, Darrow's boss. The man running it all, a faceless executive moving pieces from far above. He had money, reach, power. Mason wasn't letting it go. Not after what he saw in Ava's eyes every time she closed them. She was getting stronger, yes, eating again, speaking again, but the nights, they were still a war zone, and Mason wasn't finished. He wanted the source. It was Reed who cracked it. One night, while combing through Darrow's confiscated phone data, he traced a line of offshore messages to a name that popped up more than once. Graham Vexler, a former intelligence contractor turned shipping mogul, owned 3 airstrips, moved cargo from continent to continent, known to be clean on paper, but Reed dug deeper and found something. A shipment log with coded cargo numbers matching the timeline of Ava's disappearance. One date stood out: this weekend. A private jet, departing from a secure airstrip outside Atlanta, headed to North Africa. No listed passengers, Reed said, pointing at the screen. But the jet's registered under a shell company owned by Vexler. "What's on it?" Mason asked. Reed tapped a key. The manifest just read 6 units human priority. Mason stared at it, his hands clenched. "It's happening again. We stop it," Reed said. Now, they drove through the night. No police, no Fed, just them. By 4 a.m., they parked near the airstrip, a small, high-security runway tucked behind a construction lot, surrounded by fencing and spotlights. A blacked-out hangar sat at the far end. Reed pulled up a drone feed. Jet's there. 2 hours till takeoff. Minimal guards. Looks like private security. Is Vexler inside? We don't know, but I'll bet he is. You don't load that kind of cargo without watching it yourself. Mason checked his gear. Pistol, zip ties, flashlight, backup phone. He looked at Reed. Let's end this. They went in through the side, cut the fence, slipped through the shadows. Reed disabled 2 exterior cameras using a scrambler. Mason took out the lone perimeter guard with a chokehold, quiet, fast. They moved to the hangar wall and peeked through a crack. A team of men were loading metal crates into the jet. 6 total, each big enough for a person to fit inside, each marked with orange tape. Then a man stepped into view. Tall, expensive jacket, gray hair clean cut, confident, Graham Vexler. Mason felt heat rise in his chest. "That's him," Reed whispered. They waited until one guard moved toward the restroom trailer behind the hangar. Mason looped behind him and knocked him out. Reed disarmed another on the far end, dragging him behind a crate. Then they made their move. Mason rushed through the hangar's side door with Reed covering him. "Freeze!" he yelled, gun raised. The guards turned too late. Reed fired warning shots into the air. On the floor now, 2 of the guards dropped their weapons. A third reached for his, but Reed shot him in the leg. He screamed and fell. Vexler didn't move. He stared at Mason. "You don't know what you're doing," he said calmly. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Mason said. "You're done." Vexler raised a hand slowly. "Do you even understand how deep this goes? The people I work with? You think this ends with me?" "I don't care if it does," Mason said. "I just need it to start somewhere." Vexler smiled faintly. "You'll never keep it buried. Someone else will pick it up. Someone always does." "We'll see about that." Reed cuffed the guards. Mason opened one of the crates. Inside, a girl barely 15, unconscious but breathing. He moved to the next. Another girl, 6 in total, all sedated. Mason's stomach turned, but he kept going. They called emergency services from a secure line. Anonymous drop. Within 20 minutes, lights filled the sky. FBI, DHS, local PD, they all swarmed. Mason and Reed stood outside the fence watching Vexler get shoved into a black SUV. The crates were rolled into ambulances. The runway lit up with flashing red and blue. 3 days later, Mason sat beside Ava in their living room. She was eating cereal, her face quiet but steady. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did it," she gave him a small smile. Reed entered through the front door, holding a manila envelope. "Got this from a friend inside," he said, handing it over. Mason opened it. Inside were 2 photos. One showed Vexler in handcuffs, sitting in a courtroom. The second was a list, 8 names. High-level contacts tied to the operation. Bankers, brokers, 2 politicians. "This is going bigger," Reed said. "Feds are building a net." Mason looked at Ava, then back at Reed. "You in?" Reed grinned. "Always." Later that night, Mason walked to the beach. The same beach where Ava had disappeared. He stood in the sand, listening to the waves. remembering that day, remembering the silence after she was gone. And now she was alive home. But something inside him knew the fight wasn't over. Not really, because monsters didn't live under beds. They walked in daylight, they wore suits, they smiled on cameras. But sometimes, just sometimes, people like him could punch a hole through their walls. He turned and walked back to the house, the sea wind behind him. Ava was waiting, and he wasn't going to let her out of his sight again. Not now, not ever. If you liked this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, to strengthen our community, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.